The boys are back. We are back ready to record the first podcast as a duo for 2024, talking AFL Fantasy, and in particular focusing on the early buy rounds. What are they? How do we tackle them this year? Let's go!
Just done it from nowhere. Lifting the goal from inside the field. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty. Petrarca. The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast, Episode 2, Season 2 for the YouTube channel. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy. And for the first time in Season 2, I've unfortunately had to be, we've got him back in.
I'm back.
we were downgraded from Darren, who joined us in the first episode.
Bro,
and,
you had some knowledge getting around on that first episode. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I've come back and ruined it.
Unfortunately, we're stuck with this loser here again for Season 2. But,
why am I nervous? I don't know what to do with my hands. I was like, I haven't sat in this chair for a while.
What do I do with my hands?
I'll get back to that nervous tick. I'll be touching the mic all season.
Oh, the
Let's
old
go.
mic touch. Get your shots ready, guys.
But you did well with the interview with Darren, I thought, mate.
It was good just to get back in, and I've been itching to get back into AFL fantasy mode, and obviously been busy with the basketball, but as soon as that game opens, and it opened early this year, very early, just the mind starts ticking. You start to hear about these new buy rounds and all these round zero things, and strategy just starts to take over. And but it was good to talk to Darren. So if you haven't already, go and check that one out. He's got lots of wisdom to drop on us. I know I was taking some notes mid-podcast, highlighting players that he was identifying. So yes, do go and check that one out. But
the brain was working while I was listening to the podcast, and I thought to myself, well, hang on a second, Darren Carr.
Where are you going with this?
Are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Yeah. Oh, I've already actioned it.
Luke Hat.
Mitch Hilux.
Let's go.
I've legally changed my name.
I've worked out the secret sauce. You guys have got no chance.
Yeah.
Luke Hat. Let's go.
Luke Hat. Yeah. My name is Mitch Hilux, and I'm joined by Luke Hat.
It's all about embodying what you want in life.
It's what's the word? It's projection. You gotta
So,
thoughts to actions.
No more Luke Rogerson. It's Luke Hat from here on in, guys.
Here we go. The other thing I took away from that, he was the year before he won the car, ranked 9,000 or something like that. So we're both in with a chance.
Anyone is in with a shot.
Anyone is in. It doesn't matter what last year looked like. Fresh start, and we're ready to roll. But
I was optimistic until I saw the new buy thing, because me, I'm quite a simpleton. I represent the layman. And when I saw all this, my mind was just fried. So I'm going to need your help today, mate, to get through it.
So, yeah, that's what we're going to spend most of today's podcast talking about, is the early buy rounds. And it's the major difference for this season. And what the hell... Well, first of all, what are they? And what the hell is this early buy? What the hell is round zero? And that doesn't matter for us. And then again, how does that affect our strategy? Okay, so that's what we're going to spend most of today's podcast on. So, talking about round zero... well, first of all, the AFL has gone and decided we're going to do this weird round zero thing where we're going to have, how many teams is it? 8 teams playing in the opening round. So we've got 10 teams effectively on a bye in the first week of the AFL. So for fantasy purposes, it doesn't matter. No scores are going to count. Fantasy will start week 1. However, this is an important factor here. Prices will be affected by the scores in that opening round, so that after the first official round of AFL Fantasy, which is round 1, we will get a bigger price movement for those who had an opening round score. Depending on if it's high, if it's low. So that will affect their break even going to the first round of AFL Fantasy.
Which that has to happen for it to be equitable, doesn't it? Because then those teams will then subsequently have a bye in the coming weeks, which means they wouldn't, if they didn't get that price change, it just wouldn't be fair across the board.
Well, it affects their quote-unquote average, which is what the site uses to generate their break-evens and their price cycle. So AFL Fantasy is a 5-score rolling price average. It's all very technical, but it does affect the movement of the prices, in the early weeks, especially more so than later weeks. But effectively, for fantasy purposes, those teams that play opening round play one fewer game than those who don't in the fantasy format, because to make up for that opening round bye, the teams that play opening round then have an early bye in the first 6 weeks of the competition, which is, again, going to throw another spanner in the works.
So for people out there who might not be 100% all over it, when do I have to have my team picked by?
You got to have your team picked by round 1, which is the second round.
Good fucking luck. Good luck, you pricks. So we're counting from 0 this year.
It's counting from 0. So
oh my God.
Opening round or round 0 does not count. So that is the games where it's effectively all the Queensland and New South Wales team versus a few of the Melbourne teams. Doesn't count for fantasy. But for round 1 on the official AFL app, that's when fantasy starts. So that is the Thursday night Richmond versus Carlton, which will be the first official game that counts for AFL Fantasy.
Okay,
so Richmond versus Carlton is still our first game for fantasy.
Okay, have your team locked in by then.
That's the main takeaway.
We say it's our first game for fantasy, but we are going to be watching closely in that round 0.
That opening round will be, like, you talk about practice matches, like that will be the most important practice match weekend that we'll ever have. So, yes, that will be very important for us to watch, and you better believe we're going to be covering it when it gets closer.
Right, I can't. You got something hanging off your earphones.
Hold on a second.
Mate. I can't look at you straight with fluff hanging off your earphones.
Well, thanks for sorting that out live on the YouTube.
Right, mate, got you covered. I'm back.
Early bye rounds.
Darren wouldn't have done that for you, mate. It's good to have me back, right?
That's what you're here for, mate. Made me look good. So round 2 is going to be the start of the early bye rounds.
Yes.
So let's go through the teams that have the early bye rounds. So round 1, first week of AFL Fantasy, everybody's playing.
Beautiful.
All right. And then immediately the next week, we're going to have to talk about bye rounds. Now, in those bye rounds, it's going to be best 18, which is our normal score for regular buys.
Yep.
But instead of having the 3 trades, it'll be a regular 2 trading week. So that we're going to touch on that a bit later. But best 18 is going to be counted for those bye rounds. So those are in round 2, 3. Round 4 is the gather round, so every team plays then.
Yep.
And then round 5 and round 6. So in round 2, we've got Brisbane and Carlton on a bye. Round 3, we've got Gold Coast and GWS Giants on a bye. Round 5 is Collingwood and Sydney. And round 6 is Melbourne and Richmond. Other little smaller detail as well is that bye round players are going to be locked after the final game, just like a regular bye period would. So that has some implications in terms of loopholes, captain, VC options, and things like that.
We'll talk about that in a bit. So my initial sort of thoughts looking at it are, well, we've only got 2 teams on a bye each of these weeks.
So it should be pretty manageable.
We have the foresight of being able to not necessarily start with some of these players because it's so close to the start of the season. Are we looking to try and field 22 every week of the buys, or at least, like 21 if you had a ruck out or something like that? Like, what do you think?
Well, the important thing, and I think this is a good reflecting point. So if we cast our minds back to last season, there was one of those bye rounds in the middle of last seasons with the regular buys. Now, we had 3 trades, but it was still a best 18 situation where it was that round where we had Geelong and Gold Coast on the bye rounds, and effectively the majority of us were able to play 22 players on the field, and it was a big scoring round because your worst scores got able to be dropped off. So you had 4 scores that effectively were able to drop, and if you did pretty well to play that round properly, you got a pretty good score and a jump on the competition. So, yes, I do believe in a perfect scenario, in most cases, you should be aiming to field 22 players in the first 6 weeks. With, obviously early in the year, hopefully Carnage doesn't hit us too early, and we've got a lot of rookies and things to plug on our field.
Yeah, well, this is definitely something I wanted to discuss, was the fact that typically when we're talking bye rounds, we're talking middle of the year.
Yeah.
And so we're talking, that's sort of during upgrade season. It's upgrade season. Yeah. So something that I sort of thought about that I think is interesting is we're now having a set of bye rounds, but they're during that fix-up time. What did we call it last year?
It's fix-up trades.
Fix-up trades. So it's really interesting because if you don't end up with too many fix-up trades, you could get really sort of spicy with your trading. Sidewaysing premiums off their buys and stuff like that. But if you do that and then suddenly you have an injury, you have a couple of fix-ups that need to be made, you really could be left outside alone.
That is a good point. Like, it is a total different cycle of the AFL Fantasy, I guess, what we would normally be doing in the upgrade cadence and things like that. Normally, it is round 5 or round 6 that we do make that first upgrade. I think last year we had the famous false start where I think Doherty got injured. And
we did the Connor Rosie, remember?
Yeah, that's right. We went a bit early, but it is normally around that round 5 or 6 that we are trying to make that first upgrade trade. So, and with the fact that we're going to have opening round, and this will be probably the first point we'll talk about, is with that price being factored into it. Say like a rookie like a Cade Chandler comes out, scores a 100 in the first opening round. Now, that won't affect our scores, but you better believe that's going to affect his price. Everyone's going to have that player. Yeah. So I am forecasting that we're not going to... I mean, maybe if they don't play opening round, but we're probably not going to miss some of the must-have rookies, at least in that first week. So perhaps the necessity of doing those fix-up trades for rookies might be a little bit less this season.
Yeah, it could well be. That's a good point.
But again, it does potentially... It's all going to come down to what happens in that opening round. Maybe there's no rookies that put their hand up in that time, and we are still scratching our heads and going, okay, well, what the hell are we doing with these rookies? And are we able to make a guns and rookie strategy viable? But it is going to be very interesting to have a look at that opening rounds. But I guess like the first main point here is players who play the opening rounds, they obviously have their bye early on. They're playing one fewer games than players who don't play opening round. Like, I guess the broad question here that I want to start off with is, are we picking any of them? Because you're going to get one fewer game of them. Yeah. Are we picking players in some scenarios and not other scenarios? Like, what's your initial thoughts? And I guess, like, just starting the conversation there. Like, what are you thinking so far about these early bye rounds?
My mind's frazzled, to be honest. Like I said, I'm the lay person. But,
it's brand new, right? Like, we've never had to deal with this.
My initial thought is you can't... You can't grab a premium at the very least sort of off for that round 2 or 3 bye because you're missing a premium score when everyone else is getting one.
Yeah.
But then I can see scenarios where you could even make exceptions. So like Tom Green, for example, has a round 3 bye.
Yes.
He's around 1 and 2.
West
Melbourne
Coast.
and West Coast.
Yes.
So, like, in that scenario that I was talking about before where you wanted to get aggressive and you thought, I can probably, I think I've picked everything right. I'm not going to have to make too much fix-up trades. Yeah. Could you get Tom Green's 2 120-plus scores potentially and then trade into Sam Walsh?
Who's coming off his bye?
Exactly, who people think is value.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what I mean? So, I know I'm probably not, this is probably... I'm not straight batting straight away on the podcast. I'm talking about just like risque stuff. But I just think that there is a few different things to unpack.
Look, that could be a play. The concern that I have is, I mean, we talk about AFL Fantasy, a week being a long time in AFL Fantasy. You're banking on the fact that you're going to get 2 good weeks out of Tom Green, number one.
Yes.
You're also banking on the fact that you're not going to have any carnage come round 3.
There's a lot of ifs.
And then also, you're also banking on the fact that, someone like a Sam Walsh comes out and does what we expect him to do. So,
you could be left up the creek, couldn't you?
You could be, but it could be a play. I'm not putting it past that being a play. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of the strategy is going to be different.
Yeah.
And with it being the first time that it's been like this, I mean, we don't necessarily have the concrete answers. The way and the next podcast we're going to talk about, our lessons from last year, but the way I'm leaning towards it is that I think if you go back and listen to the interview with Darren, he's sort of, I'm following his advice and saying
wise
no.
move.
Yeah, well, he seems to know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But no premiums in the early bye rounds, and I'm going to put extra emphasis on the midfielders because we've talked about it before that midfielders, there's heaps of them, right? There's a lot of gun players that play in the midfield that we can select in our fantasy team. Tom Green, we talked about those first 2 matchups. He might smash out 120s in those first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
But there also might be 5 other midfielders that do the same thing that don't have that early bye. So I think that just for the sake of you've got lots of other options. My blanket rule this far is no premium midfielders with an early bye. I do believe it's a little bit different in the other lines because we are a little bit more thin of positions, but I think we'll touch on that early. But that's for the premiums. Yep. What about mid prices? Like,
Well, yeah, can I, in terms of the mid prices, let me throw a couple of names at you and we'll just like discuss some cases. So like some people that have been talked about popular, Zach Williams in the back line, he has a round 2 bye, straight up.
Yep.
So he's an interesting one because what I feel is what will happen is people will set themselves a round 0 line. So if Zach Williams comes out and scores 140 in round 0, then you're like, fuck, well, I can't miss that double price change because then I'm not getting him at the same price as everyone else. But if Zach Williams comes out and gets
an 80,
which would still be good considering his value,
price, but it's
like, can I get on him in 2 weeks and get the what do you call it? The cost, opportunity cost of the points that you would get if you didn't have him.
Right.
So that's kind of my sweeping statement, is that with a lot of these mid prices, we'll probably set ourselves a line.
Yeah,
and go, well,
and the hardest thing is going to be if like someone scores like that, you know, say Brodie Grundy comes out and scores 85.
Oh,
it's going to be...
Well, these are the other names I want to throw to you, is because let's go Flanders, Adams, Grundy.
Yes.
From the talk that I've heard, I can see a lot of teams going like, I like all 3 of those guys. They all have the same bye round.
Adams and Grundy have got 5. Flanders has got 3, I think.
3.
Yeah,
okay.
he's round 3. So, and this is the other thing, we're going to start to memorize these these early
do.
buys.
Goodness.
So, and this is the other thing in terms of like, well, what do you consider a premium?
Yeah.
What do you consider a mid-pricer? And I think there's 2 differences between where they're priced at and what they're going to function in your team as. So, for example, someone like a Grundy is priced at a mid-pricer, like he's 677,000, which is a mid-pricer price. But in terms of what we would expect, if you're having Brodie Grundy in a regular season, in a normal year, you would be expecting to put him into your team and run him up at least to his normal buy round, and then look to trade him there once you've got your team, quote-unquote, full of premiums. Like, he would be the last person you'd be trying to upgrade to an English or something like that.
Yeah.
But in this year, if you're considering him a quote-unquote mid-price, I mean, the true definition of a mid-price, it was someone like, for example, Warple last year, who... You get him in for some early cash generation, and then it's okay to chop him off, get him out of your team, and get him up to a proper premium.
And you didn't chop him that week.
And I didn't chop him, and it was a great move.
But you got fucking kid.
But like a Callahan, Finn Callahan last year was another example. These guys where that kind of early upgrade season where you might not have enough cash to get like the basement rookies up to a premium, but you do have enough cash to get those mid prices up. So someone like a Zach Williams, I think, falls more into that camp.
Yeah.
But a Brodie Grundy doesn't, because I think you're going to have higher priorities in terms of quote-unquote upgrading.
Grundy is interesting too because he's on a line that you may not be able to cover for a buy. So you may concede that if you own Grundy, on the week that you own Grundy, you might be conceding 21 unless you have...
Are we going to have a playing R3?
Well, this is the question. And if we do, like historically, they don't score
They don't score well, yeah.
You might
and
get a 15.
I'm usually... I think last year we talked about... I think who was the... So Samson Ryan played round 1 last year, but we opted to not go to him because we wanted that loophole. But this year... I would be more inclined to have those 30 green dots because 4 out of those first 6 weeks, you're going to have a loop option regardless. So I do think 30 green dots, if available, which it might not be, we don't really know yet, if possible, I'd be looking to go there more so than ever this year. But yeah, it is an interesting one. And
So let me throw a few more names at you. So Kadeem Coleman.
Here's another interesting one. I'd put him in... he's a bit more pricey than a Zach Williams.
But if he comes out and goes 120 first, is it round 0? You kind of can't ignore that, can you? Especially
what he did 28K.
What he did in the grand final, combined with the fact that is it Rich?
Daniel Rich, he's out. He's obviously retired.
So do we see Coleman as just he's the guy? I mean, he's got such silky skills.
Surely I mean, he's a guy that they will want the ball in his hands, and he did see a scoring uptick last year when Daniel Rich was out. But I do think it is going to be one where I do think like the bottom line is if they've got an early buy, there's got to be some pretty darn good reasons that they're in your side.
Yeah, okay.
Like it's got to be like if you're considering between 2 players who are both value, if the guy has an early buy and the guy doesn't, like you're going with the guy who doesn't every day of the week if they're anywhere close to a coin flip. So you've got to have I think a pretty good reason to start with a player if they're a mid-price or a premium regardless, to put them in over someone who doesn't.
Do you think we treat the round 2-3 buys differently to the way we treat the round 5-6 buys?
This is a good question. I do think so, yes. Especially more for those players like a Grundy, Taylor Adams,
The problem is the price change, isn't
Yeah.
it? Because it's like if you go, oh, well, I'm fading Grundy because he has a round 5 buy. You go, well, hang on, by the time I get on him, if he does what some people expect him to do, it's like, well, I didn't even actually get the value that I was hoping for because he's now gone up.
He's gone up 150k.
Exactly, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you kind of, whereas the Sam Walsh, round 2 buy, people see him as value, but let's say...
He might got 50k.
Yeah, and you probably like... And if he's doing what maybe we hope him to do, then you're still happy to get on him at that because you're hoping he's like a 110 guy.
Might still be value at that point. I do think it does make a slight difference, but I don't think it's like night and day. Like they're still playing one fewer games than the players who don't have a bye. So I do think that it's a difference, but not as much as maybe some people might think of initially.
Guys at Gold Coast, Flanders, Anderson, Took, Fuckhead. What do we think?
Excuse me, what'd you call me?
All the relevant players at the Gold Coast.
All the relevant players. I mean, again, if we talk about, most of their relevant players are midfielders. So Took Miller, I know he's a popular player. Again, I'm going to fall back to that rule of, could I just find a midfielder that is, around his price range that doesn't have an early buy that's of a similar upside?
Jack Steele.
I think I might be able to do that.
Are they priced similarly, he and Jack?
Yeah, he and Jack. LDU is another one around that price range as well.
Yeah.
I think that, again, I would have to have a pretty darn good reason to go for Took over those guys. Like, I would have to think that he's going to eclipse their scoring by 10, 15 points, which is a big ask, I do think. So, the other thing is, so we touched on it a little bit before, and that's why, again, the midfielders, but if we talk about, like you said before, about Brodie Grundy, there's just fewer options. So, or a Taylor Adams, for example, or a Sam Flanders. Like, if you're not going Sam Flanders, who are you putting instead? Are you putting in Tex Walker, who's the top 6 averaging forward right now in terms of price? It's the other options, I think, that will dictate us. And for that reason, if you are forced to go with some of those guys like a Flanders, like a Taylor Adams, like a Grundy, well, you've already got 3 guys with an early buys. I do think you want to limit the overall amount of early buy players you have in your team. I put a poll up actually a few days ago about how many people have got players with early buys in their team. And it was surprising to me the amount of people that answered. 44% of people on this poll answered that they've got rookies, prices, and 1 to 2 mid prices. So more than just...
premiums as well?
Yeah, they've got 1 or 2 premiums, they've got mid prices, and they've got rookies all in there. So my guess is they've got at least sort of 5 or 6 players in the early buy rounds.
Well, maybe people would consider sort of Flanders and...
I would consider Flanders
Grundy,
a premium. Like he's
Grundy potentially premiums. Like you said, it's the battle, whether it's their average, what they're priced at, or what we expect them to do. But what... The thing too is so let's say a guy like Flanders, he's got the early buy, but the way it's shaping up, we expect him to be, if he stays in that role, comfortably a top 640. He could even be an F1 kind of guy.
And he's potentially value too, is the other key point.
So I guess with a line where there's, like you said, there's so little or few options, it's kind of just like we suck it up. We pay for the guy that we know is going to be there, and we just cop that. I think you would only sort of change your decision making if you looked at your team and you had more than 2 guys on any one line that had a buy at the same time.
Yeah,
because then you're going, well, I literally can't cover this and play 22.
Well, so an example might be in the defense. Zach Williams, Kadeen Coleman, both have round 2.
Yeah.
Do you have to make a decision between one or the other?
Yeah.
I know there's a price difference. There's about 200k difference between Zach Williams and Kadeen Coleman. But you're starting round 2 with 2 players off your defense. Defender rookies in previous seasons have usually been pretty average.
Injury.
So, there's not a whole lot, at least early on, that I can see a lot of high-scoring defender rookies, at least at a lower price tag, that you'd be pretty confident putting it out into your field. I know they might get dropped, but you want at least the potential of them coming up and scoring a 70 or an 80. Whereas early stages, again, it's January 2nd right now, we're recording this, I just don't see that happening. So I do think it is something to, if you've got the premium feature on that AFL Fantasy, that assistant coach, you can go and have a look. Okay, on each of my lines, do I have players on the same buy round early on? And if you do, I do think it's something that you might want to consider looking for alternatives. And having a play around with making sure that you can get 22 players on the field in those early buy rounds, with the exception maybe of that ruck line if there's no playing R3.
Talk to me about this Guns and Rookies stuff, because I've never lived in a world where Guns and Rookies has been the strategy. So what the hell's Guns and Rookies?
Yeah, so Guns and Rookies that's the old school way of playing AFL Fantasy as far as I'm aware. Again, I started playing in 2019, and at the time I had no idea what I was doing. So,
And you do now?
Yeah, mate, I'm a 2-time near hat winner.
2-time near hat. How about
that
that fella that we were watching on YouTube the other day that's played 2 seasons, won 2
Yeah,
rounds?
JD, I think he was. Shout out to him.
Right.
Yeah, just waltzes in. Just, Supercoach guy, tries his AFL Fantasy thing. And
how good's that?
Yeah, makes me feel a bit angry. But anyway.
Sorry for bringing it up.
No, that's all right. I think so. The Guns and Rookies strategy, obviously, rookies, no matter how good a mid-pricer is, rookies, they're all priced at, 30s, essentially.
Yep.
So rookies are going to make the most amount of cash out of everyone in our team. They're going to make the most of cash. And the premiums are probably still going to score the most, or we have the most confidence in them scoring the most. So the idea between a Guns and Rookies stage is we've got the gun players are going to score you the points.
Yep.
The rookies are going to generate you the cash. It's going to be a quicker increase in your overall team value, so you can get that full team of premiums onto your field sooner rather than later.
Okay.
The mid prices have come into vogue recently and accelerated in popularity because if you get the right one, and if they pop early, they can generate cash whilst giving you premium type scores, and then allow you to get to those full team of premiums first. And you've also got the ability to, if they do fail, it's an easy sideways move to go to the mid price, so that does pop. Whereas if you're in that Guns and Rookies structure, if there is a mid price that does pop, you've got to go down from a premium and then get another guy up. And it is a little bit more tricky to make that work because sometimes you don't want to, get rid of a premium or, you don't want to color a rookie early. So it's it makes those early fix-up trades a little bit more difficult, in my opinion. But with 4 out of our first 6 rounds being best 18, are those mid-prices going to be that much better than the 1 or 2 rookies that might be included in that 18? Because every year we've got
considering it. Okay.
a random rookie that comes out and scores a 90, or we might have this year like a Colby McKercher, if he's got that half-back role like they did in North last year, then he's probably going to be part of our best 18. And some of those rookies that do elevate themselves into that kind of high-scoring territory. So
okay, interesting.
It does kind of lend itself a little bit more. I still think that there is a place for the right mid-pricer.
Yeah.
But it does have to be the right one, which it does kind of have to be every year in that case. But I do still think that, like you said before, the fact that these buy rounds are coming at that time where we are doing those fix-up trades, I still firmly believe that you don't want to limit that opportunity for you to have the flexibility to sideways those mid-prices that flop to the ones that are going off, rather than sidewaysing players on their buys just to get players playing.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's just my early thoughts at this stage. So the other things that we want to cover, I guess, again, how we approach that early round 0, like what are we looking for? So in terms of when we're looking at practice rounds, we're looking for role.
Of course.
We're not really worrying about score so much, but when in a round 0, when the score affects their price movement, how are we going to use that in like assessing players for our starting squad?
I think, like I mentioned, in terms of the scoring in round 0, it's going to be a matter of giving yourself a bit of a line. And I think something that I'll talk about in our next podcast, lessons from last year, is trying to not let emotion dictate the decisions that you make. And so go asking yourself, what's my line on Zach Williams, for example, and what score does he have to give me to make me pick him pre-round 1 and cop his round 2 bye.
Yeah.
I think if you kind of boil it down to something like that, you do all your research, you work out, okay, what's his likely price increase, all of these little factors that contribute, and you say, if he scores X, I pick him. If he doesn't score X, I sit, and then I can still pick him after round 2. You know what I mean? So that would be my idea of what I'm going to be watching in terms of scores. But the other thing I thought is, even though the scores are influential from round 0, bro, I'll be looking at roll 2 because it's like the ultimate practice game. It's the practice game where the points actually count. So,
the coaches are not going to be fucking around.
Exactly.
Like,
so
they're not going to be playing silly buggers.
You're going to get a straight insight into
it's premiership points.
What the coach thinks of player X, player Y. Yeah. So we're going to see where rookies are likely to be playing. We're going to be seeing who's in the midfield rotations for some of these teams. So, like, for example, some of the teams I'm going to be watching closely, I want to see what Dimmer's doing up at the Gold Coast. So I want to see what role is Flanders in? Is he in that role that he was to finish last year? I want to see what he does with Bailey Humphrey. I want to see. I want to have a look at the Sydney midfield mix. We've got some relevant Sydney players. So I don't know whether Callum Mills will be playing, but I want to know what Taylor Adams is doing. I suspect it'll be inside.
James
Jordan is the other name I was looking
Goulden,
for.
Like, how much is he on the wing?
Exactly. So, like, Sydney suddenly have an influx of these guys that have probably been promised some sort of mid-time. What does that look like? So round 0 is going to be like crucial for scores because the scores influence the pricing, but I think it's going to be so much more crucial to be looking at role and structure.
The other thing that I also thought of while you were chatting there is just the matchup as well. So one of the most interesting battles, I think, in the preseason that everyone's going to be watching is that Brodie Grundy versus Max Gawn matchup.
Gawndy.
Because the Gawndy's going to be back in fashion this year. They both present value, obviously, and there's a world where you have both.
You can't
in
pick
your
both.
starting.
They both got a buy.
Well, that's the thing, but they both present value. They're both different buys, and like the numbers suggest that they both could be in a normal year. If they both didn't have a buy, I think vast majority of us would go both Max and Gawn. Gawn and Grundy.
If you pick both of them, how are you going to pick Sherry?
That's the thing there, mate. We're going back to the island. But, like, thinking of that, though, say Grundy comes up and he's got Max, a difficult opponent. So do we give him a little bit more leeway in terms of his scoring because it's Max? And we go, okay, well, the next week he's going up against Collingwood and against Darcy Cameron and Mason Cox. So
Big Cox.
If he scores
he's gonna get railed
like
by
a 85, is that really like on a regular opponent like 100?
What's he priced at exactly?
75, I want to say. Grundy, that is.
But his problem is he's got a later buy. He's got the round 5 buy.
Yeah.
So, see, I don't think even if he scores at 85 in the first, I think you still have to pick him because, like, let's say
he's
he
an
goes
85%.
85, then he goes kind of 95, then he goes a low 100, then you're still going to lose so much value by the time you pick him that it's going to leave a sour taste in your mouth.
It's still an eye on, is he an 85% ruckman? Or is he a 70% ruckman?
So for him, it's more role than output in round 0?
I think so. I'm also going to stress on someone like a Grundy and a Taylor Adams, players who are a little bit on the older side, the eye test.
I know you hate old people.
I hate old people. Over 30 rule.
What a prick.
But the eye test, I think, is going to be important. Like,
what are you going to do when we're over 30 in a few years?
Just park it, I reckon. Just
park up. He's done.
Park up, which probably only gives you one more good year left.
How many years till you're 30?
We're the same age, mate.
No.
Yeah, one more year.
I'm a little younger than you, I think, actually.
Yeah, by what? A few weeks. It's this year or bust, really. But yeah, looking at how Grundy's moving, like, is he like, and how are they using him in the Sydney midfield? Like, is he linking up with part of the midfield? Is he, taking some of those marks and looking like the Grundy of old, or is he, looking like a 90 averaging ruckman kind of thing? Like, I think that eye test will be very important as well as the stats and the role and things like that. Anyone else from those early buys that we've touched on? I've got a few players here that I just want to maybe throw out there that are popular, especially some guys that are a bit higher in ownership.
Throw them to me, mate.
Sam Walsh. He is someone who at the moment is selected by... not the forwards, how many people? He's selected by 34% of the competition, which to me, and I get it, I understand if it was a normal year, he would be in my team.
Yeah.
But for this season, he's got the round 2 bye. I don't think there's a world where I'm starting Sam Walsh in my team to start the year.
And he's priced at?
He's priced at, so he's 854K. I believe that's priced around 95.
So let's say he goes and let's say people expect him to be a 105 guy, maybe if they're picking him, maybe
they're optimistically thinking 110.
Okay, so like let's say he comes out in round 1 and he does 105.
Yep.
So round 0 he does 105.
Yeah, versing the Brisbane Lions at the Gabba.
Tough game.
Yeah.
Then he goes round 2, he goes 110. Let's say optimistically. His price has not going to
it's not going to completely get away from you.
It's not going to get away from you because the way my understanding is the way the pricing mechanism works is that those top guys are more likely to.
Well, the magic number is highest at the start of the year.
Yeah, okay.
And you've got rookies that are performing well above where they're priced at. So
he'd have to be going 140, bang bang to get up to make you feel like fuck. I missed him properly because you missed the score and you missed the price increase. But it's like what percentage chance do we think he's going to come out and just go bang, bang on Brisbane? And then you said who else?
So he's got Brisbane and then Richmond, obviously opening the season with that. He does have North Melbourne immediately after his bye in round 3.
Well, then that's
perfect time to jump on him if you want to.
Makes like, okay, so let's say you get unlucky, he goes up 50K.
The other thing with the Sam Walsh, and we're staying on him because he's popular, is that like we assume he's going to come back to his he's averaged 109 in the past, but he did that in a purely inside role. Yeah. Like, there's no guarantee that he's going back into that role this year. Doherty moved into the midfield. They've still got Patrick Cripps there. What's going on with someone like a George Hewitt? Like, how much is Adam Chera inside? Like, it's not as if we can just, put him in, lock him in as an 80% midfielder because they've shown in the past that they don't mind him starting in the forward line coming up to the stoppages. They don't mind him playing a little bit of wing. Like, he's versatile to a fault in fantasy that he can be used in a number of different ways. So someone like him, theoretically, he has value, but he also might not. Like, he might not be the 1.5, 1.10 guy that we want him to be.
I also think that Carlton was so good at the back half of last year, and I think part of that was because they didn't really have too much piggish behaviour in terms of fantasy. They just kind of all got on the same page and just went with it. Maybe other than backline. Nick? Is it Nick? No.
Nick Newman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not to say we're not sitting here saying that Walsh isn't value because, like I said, in any other season,
any other year, he would 100%.
Be a case of like after round 2.
He's just someone that I'm pushing back on. The only other one that I really want to touch on, who is in 57% of teams right now, and that is Nick Dacos, who we didn't start with last year.
No, don't tell me everyone started.
Should have.
Is that because
when you fading him again?
When you first sign into fantasy, your team comes up and it's the defenders you pick first.
The top one, yeah.
So it's like they're like, oh,
Nick Dacos. He was bloody good.
Yeah, anyone who's just joining for the first time, fuck, he's at the top of the list. He must be all right.
And if I go through and I look at, okay, what do I expect Nick Dacos to average this season? I actually do think he has a chance to take another step up. Like, it's only his 3rd year.
That guy's so good.
He moved into the midfield more and more as the season went on, and as he did go into the midfield, he averaged better. Right. And he also has an injury-affected score with his last game. Obviously, he got fingered and broke his bone. And by the way, we're trademarking that.
I heard it's been. Oh, hey, I reckon let it go. But it's been co-opted by some members of the community.
Yeah, which we're all about.
Getting on it.
Getting on the finger. But and he also has Finn early in the year.
Yeah.
I think he's got him round 5, I want to say, or round 4, immediately before his early bye.
This is the worst. Like this is the worst scenario I can imagine in my mind. So last year, all the evidence pointed to having Dacos.
Yeah.
And I chose not to. And now I'm Luke Rogerson, not Luke Hatt. and this year, all the evidence probably is saying like, oh, don't start with Dacos. He's highly priced and he's got to buy.
Yeah.
And you watch, I won't start with him again.
Yeah, he's going to,
which is meant to be the good move this time.
You watch him in the opening round, he versus, he versus the GWS Giants. I don't see him getting a tag in a game like that. They don't typically tag. He's going to go nuts. Like, he's going to come out. He's going to look incredible. He's robbed of a Brownlow, in my opinion. So he's going to be hungry. He's going to be thirsty. But is he worth starting at his price tag? It's going to be also an issue of, he's going to be extremely highly owned. So if you don't go with him and he pops off and hurts you, is it going to be hard to watch those first 3 to 4 rounds without Dacos in your side?
The answer is
yes. Or because he's so highly owned, and you fade him, he gets fingered in round 4, And
has a bye in round
you look, bye in round 5.
5.
You're looking pretty good in those 2 rounds, and you might get a jump on him in round 7 or 8 where you might get him at a cheaper price. Just something to consider. I was very shocked to see the fact that he is one of the most popular players in AFL Fantasy at the moment. I want to say he actually is the most popular. Yes, he is actually... Harley Reid is the most popular, but of the premium players, he is the most selected premium in the game, and he does have that early buy round, and I would say he's fairly priced at this stage.
He's a gun.
He's gun. There's no question about that. But just an interesting one to think of. There's a few other guys that we might touch on. Obviously, next week we're going to be going through our defenders, and the week after that our mids and forwards and rucks and all that sort of good stuff. We'll touch on all the relevant players there, but... just when it comes to talking early buy rounds, I think it's an interesting one to talk about.
Definitely is, man. All right, we said this one would only go for a little bit, but we just get carried away, don't we?
It's time to talk AFL Fantasy. It's very exciting. Let us know down in the comment section below on YouTube if you are watching along. What are your thoughts and how are you going to tackle the early buy rounds? Are you going to be trying to limit as much as you can? Do you just want to not worry about it too much, pick your favourite players, which is, again, a decent strategy as well. So
yeah, maybe some people like to have fun playing this game, eh?
Wouldn't know them, but... but yeah, let us know down there, guys. And if you are excited, make sure, if you haven't already, give this video a big thumbs up. Give us a 5-star rating over on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
Even if you
haven't
like
already. Yeah, even if you didn't, just be a good bloke. Just chuck it, or a good gal, and chuck the old thumbs up. Hit subscribe, and we will catch you guys next time. Laters.
The transition.